Okay. Go ahead and put it in slideshow mode. Beginning. And let's go ahead and take a look at Chapter 4, Process Costing. Okay, so now what we're going to talk about is what happens if we don't track our cost by job. In Chapter 3, we were tracking our product cost, our direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, and we were tracking them to each individual job. Of course, we would have to do what? Our direct cost, direct materials, direct labor were easily traced. For our manufacturing overhead, we had to apply those costs to our jobs, right? Okay, and then we saw how those moved through to from work in progress into finished goods and cost of goods sold. Okay, now we're going to be looking at process costing. And what happens with process costing now is each item that we produce is no longer unique. Now they are homogeneous. For example, boxes of cornflakes. What happens? We have the flakes and we put them in a box, and I submit to you that if I were to, show you the two boxes and then have you close your eyes and mix them up, you wouldn't know which one was which, right? Okay, and so these are all the same. They are homogeneous. We produce them uniformly. All right. So what happens? In this situation, under process costing, we will track our costs by department. So let's just think about a box of cornflakes. You got the flakes, you got the box. Okay, so we're going to just imagine two departments here for this, the flake department and the boxing department. So what happens? In the flake department, we're going to sit there and we're going to mix up, flour or whatever, corn mash, whatever they use, and the sugar and everything is going to go in the water and the eggs and the milk, whatever they put into those. And let's say we have what? One big flake. There's all our raw materials in the what? In the flake department, right? Now we have to turn them into flakes. It's one big flake we have to turn into flakes. So we get those little Oompa Loompa guys from, Charlie Wonka or whatever his name is, Willy Wonka. And what happens? They start hitting the big flake with little plastic baseball bats or something, and it makes the flakes, right? So now we've got what? We've got direct labor, we've got direct materials, right? Now, of course, we don't expect those guys to do that work in the dark, so we have what? We have lights on while they're doing that, and so we're also going to have overhead, aren't we? Okay, so we're going to have maybe some of our depreciation be applied. We can't trace it directly. We apply it to that department using the predetermined manufacturing overhead rate. But now instead of it going directly to a job, it's going to go what? To that department, right? Okay, so now we've got a bunch of flakes, but nobody will buy the flakes if we just sit there and throw a bunch of flakes on the counters at Safeway, right, and the shelves at Safeway. So we got to put it in a box, right? So what do? We have those flakes go to the next department now, which is going to be the boxing department. And in the boxing department, we will do what? We will take the flakes, put them in the box. So we've got what? We've got cardboard. We've got that little wax paper that's inside the cornflake box. So we've got some raw materials. And then what? We take the flakes and we put them in the box, but we need a dude in there who folds up the boxes. Maybe the boxes are flat when we get them. He's got to fold up the boxes, and he's got to do what? Put the flakes in the box. Let's say item at a box at a time. Great job if you can get it, right? So we've got some direct material, and we've got what? Some direct labor. And of course, that guy can't do that work in the dark. And so what are we going to do? We're going to have to apply some of our overhead to that particular department, right? Using our predetermined overhead rate and whatever our driver is. So now what? Now we've got the work in process from Department 1 has become what? Work in process for Department 2. In Department 2, we applied more labor, more materials, more overhead, and now we are finished with that. It'll come out of work in process in Department 2 and into what? Finished goods, and then from finished goods out to cost of goods sold. Okay, so that's just to give us a visual of what we're saying is happening with a process costing system. okay, where we have the direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead is going to go into processing department 1, out of processing department 2, into out of process department 1, into 2, and then into finished goods and out to cost of goods sold. Okay, so let's just go ahead and let's take a look at this example just so we can follow through with T accounts and journal entries as we track these costs through these departments. In this example, we have Department A, Department B. Look, you can have what? Hundreds of departments in a manufacturing, but it's just for our purposes, we'll just limit it to 2 departments, okay? Okay, so we go ahead and we have our work in process for Department A. They will have direct materials. Department B will have some direct materials. So if we had the Flake Department, they've got raw materials of corn, dough, and eggs, and whatever, water, whatever they put in those raw materials for Department A. In Department B, the raw materials are what? Cardboard boxes, etc. But each get their raw materials. Then what? Then we start to apply the direct labor. In Department A, the Flake Department, it's those little Oompa Loompa guys, whatever. In what? In Department B, it's the box folder, right? But each have their own labor, okay? Then what? Then we apply the overhead, and it's going to be, if there's any indirect labor, indirect materials associated with each of those departments, those would be applied, the overhead would be applied. For the others, for the utility bill, those would be applied using our predetermined overhead rate, right? Then what? Then any cost in Department A's work in progress will become what? Will become work in process, somebody told me the other day, I keep calling it work in progress when it's process. Sorry. Work in process of what? Department A becomes the work in process of Department B as we put the flakes into the boxes, right? Now we've got what? Now we've got boxes of flakes. Those are finished, so they come out of work in process Department B into work in process, into finished goods. Now out of work in process of Department B, from our boxing department to our finished goods. Now I wrote in manufacturing cost down there, encircled cost of goods manufactured, because notice we have the same terms now that we had for process costing, right? Everything that we add to our work in process is called manufacturing cost. Okay, don't forget our direct labor and our overhead are called conversion cost, right? And then we have everything that comes out of work in process of the last department and goes into finished goods is called cost of goods manufactured. And of course, cost of goods sold is the easiest thing in this whole equation, as things come out of finished goods and into cost of goods sold. Question? No? That clear? Okay, good. Sorry, I had reveal codes open when I was doing this and forgot to turn it off and then copied it and didn't feel like going back and redoing it for this, so you get a little extra here. So, which of the following companies would be most likely to use a process costing system? Let's start at the bottom. Law firm? No, what? Every case is different, right? A tax case is going to be different than a murder case, isn't it? Okay, unless you killed somebody while you were doing your taxes, and then they might be related, okay? Then what? Item C, a furniture manufacturer. Each piece of furniture is probably different, right? Big chairs, little chairs, beds, tables, okay? So we can easily track that to each job. Shipbuilder. Every ship is different. Some ships are going to be, battleships. Other are going to be cruise liners, right? Okay. Utility producing natural gas. Natural gas, it's not very easy to say, well, this was natural gas for, this particular product for natural gas in cans. There's the natural gas that we sold over to PG&E. It's too difficult, right? So as those move along from the, gas department to the tanking department, or I don't know where they put the smell in the gas. Does natural gas have a natural odor to it? It has no odor at all, right? They put that smell in there so you don't say, gee, how come I'm dying? Okay, so they put it in there so you're like, hey, what's going on? And you get the hell out of there, right, before it blows up on you or something. So what happens? We would probably have to have a couple departments, but you can't keep track of gas by job. Okay, it's going to be by department. Okay. Okay, good. How about which of the following is least likely to use process costing? Um, Compact discs, hardy har har, as though something still existed. Okay, remember those compact discs that we used to all think was the rage? By the time you guys were growing up, you were probably already playing frisbee with them, right? Because they weren't very useful. And so what happens? Those are all pretty much uniform the same. So we use process costing. Slacks for casual wear, Dockers or something. You know, they all look. They still make Dockers? You know, they pretty much all look exactly the same, right? They just come off one after the other. Baseball hats. You say, but wait a minute, my hat says White Sox and his says Giants. What's going on? Those are different. But the basic hat is the same, right? It's just a different logo that you're sewing on it. So that's going to be pretty much process costing. Calculators, right? Can't tell one from the other. Custom cabinets, what? Some houses have nice cabinets, some have cheap cabinets. Small houses only need 2 cabinets. Big houses need 52 cabinets. So it's going to be different, right? Cabinets are going to be made custom order. Okay, and it says custom in there, all right? So custom means special, right? Okay. Okay, good. So you would use process costing for that. Okay, let's take a look then at a couple of questions that are in your quiz document, but for a few of these, remember in the first few chapters I said I've pasted them in. That'll stop around chapter 6, so don't get too used to it. Okay, but we come in and we take a look at this one and we say which of the reason I say, you know, I stopped doing it, I just ran out of time to do it. I mean, the thing I was trying to do is put the quiz questions next to the subject that we had talked about. So there's that linkage there. Nice thing if you can keep that up, but I ran out of time to keep doing that. Anyway, okay. So what happens? We sit here and we say which of the following journal entries would be used to record the application of manufacturing overhead to work in process in a process costing system with 2 processing departments. Okay, so you are not going to debit manufacturing overhead and credit work in process. I mean, that's just nonsense. There is no journal entry that involves that. It is what? It is a debit to work in process and a credit to manufacturing overhead for the applied, right? When would we debit manufacturing overhead? Well, we could debit it if we were under applied, then excuse me, no, if we were under applied, so this would be, if we were over applied, right, this would be 6 and this would be 4, right, we would debit if we were over applied, but we would also, debit it for the actual, right, overhead costs, so we would debit what, I don't know, indirect, excuse me, we would debit manufacturing overhead, like that, for indirect labor and credit what? Huh? Good, I would credit salaries payable, right? If it was indirect labor, right? I would credit what? Utilities payable? And debit the manufacturing overhead for the utilities, right? If it's indirect materials, I would credit what? Raw materials? And debit the manufacturing overhead? Okay, what would I do with depreciation? You want me to do what with accumulated depreciation? Good, I would credit accumulated depreciation and debit manufacturing overhead, assuming it was on the factory building, right? Okay. Okay, good. So you would go through that process, and then we would what? Apply it based on the predetermined overhead rate, right? And we saw that we apply it to Department A, Department B gets their work in process gets debited, the manufacturing overhead applied size gets credited, right? Hello? Okay. Okay, good. These others are wrong just because they're nonsense, right? Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead then and let's take a look at this one. And we say if Grayson Manufacturer incurred 17,400 of direct labor in the assembly department and 10,300 for direct labor in the painting department, the journal entry to record the labor used is, and this is a true or false, would we debit work in process, assembly, work in process, painting, and credit raw materials? No. I agree with what? The debits to the work in process for the labor, we would credit what? Salaries payable. Now, if they were told me this was paint and materials, then I would go ahead and debit what? Debit raw materials. Excuse me, credit raw materials and debit the work in process assembly, right? Hello? What are you guys saving your energy for tonight, for Valentine's Day? You know, I gotta be ready tonight. Let me get my beauty rest during managerial counseling. Okay? Don't worry about Valentine's Day. Don't worry about it. By the time you finish your degree, you'll have broken up with whoever you're seeing now. Okay? So don't worry about it. Okay? All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and let it come to you. Okay? Any question on this? Okay, good. All right. Now, what happens? We need to understand this concept of equivalent units of production. Okay, now if you've had some managerial accounting before, you maybe have thought about this. If you haven't, this is going to seem a little bit weird to you when you first see it. Okay, it's a little bit abstract as to what we're doing here. When we go back to the, the Flake Department, remember the Flake Department? Okay, when we go back to them, did something happen? Did something turn off or something? Did my pacemaker stop? I'm just kidding. I don't have a pacemaker. I don't have a. You think I'm that old? I don't have a pacemaker. My dad has a pacemaker. The only problem with somebody who has a pacemaker, sometimes when they yawn and they put their arms over their head like this, the garage door goes up. No, I'm just kidding. I keep telling my dad that that's going to happen. Okay. So what happens? It's fine. It sounded like something stopped recording. That's why I wanted to check, but it's fine. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's talk about this equivalent unit. So go back to the Flake Department. Okay. And we had a bunch of flour and corn and stuff mixed up, right? And let's say that we got that all mixed up, ready to go. The whistle blows at 12:35, at 5 o'clock on New Year's Eve, 12:31. The whistle blows. Everybody wants to go home, right? And the Oompa Loompa guys and everybody say, we're not working overtime tonight. We're not dumping that out of that barrel. Just put it in the refrigerator. We'll get it back to it after New Year's, right? So what happens? We've got some stuff that is still in progress, don't we? Okay, or let's say they've hit half the flake and they don't want to deal with the other half of the flake. They say, just put it in the refrigerator. We'll hit the other half of the flake when we come back from New Year's, right? So at the end of the year, we're going to have work that is what? Still sitting on the conveyor belts, halfway done, right? Okay, well, what we're going to do is give ourselves credit for work that we have done up to a point and treat those as though they were completely done units, okay, so that we are actually computing our costs based on the equivalent units of production, even though some of our stuff is still in progress, okay? So the way we do this, and the calculation is pretty easy. If we had 10,000 units that were in process, and we look and we say, hey, we're 70% done. You know, we're actually done as it relates to materials, and we've hit 70% of this big flake. We only got 10% to go, but my guys want to go home. It's New Year's Eve. And so what happens? They don't finish that last 30%, then we would consider that what? Equivalent to 7,000 complete units, even though we've got enough stuff out there for what? 10,000 units at that point in time. But we would count those as though they were 7,000 units since we're 70% done with them. Okay? So pretty easy calculation to do there, right? To convert into equivalent units. So let's just take a look at this example problem here. Okay? And so they tell us that we have completed 10,000 units, and we are having 5,000 units in process that are 30% complete. What are the equivalent units? Well, and I shouldn't have put dollars on here. These are not dollars, these are units, right? It doesn't want to erase now. It's not dollars, it's units, right? 10,000 units. Okay, and then we've got what? We've got 5,000 units that are in progress, and the problem tells us those are 30% done, so that's 1,500 equivalent units. So we add the 10,000 that are done plus the what? The 5,000 in progress that we're giving ourselves credit for 30% of that work we've already completed. That gives us 1,500, so the equivalent units is 11,500 here, right? Okay. Okay, good. Now, when we use this equivalent units of production, there are two methods that are available: FIFO and weighted average. Okay, weighted average is not as accurate as FIFO, but we'll look at it first. Okay, and then if we have time today, there's another set of slides that I put up on Canvas today. It's called 4B, in which we'll talk about FIFO. So 4A considers weighted average, and then 4B will consider FIFO. FIFO's more accurate. The reason FIFO is more accurate is what? When you're producing something, stuff goes first in, first out, doesn't it? So it actually mimics the way items would flow through our inventory. Weighted average is a little more less precise. I don't know. Some people say one's easier than the other. I think most of my students think weighted average is easier. The problem that I have is holding them both in my brain at the same time. Okay, when I look at weighted average, I'm like, okay, and I accept it. And then I look at FIFO and I go, okay, and I accept it. But FIFO destroys weighted average in my brain. And so then I look back at weighted average and I go, okay, but while they were in there, they got in a fight, and that time FIFO died. Okay, so the trick is holding them both in your brain at the same time, not so much understanding one or the other. Okay, all right, so let's just go ahead and let's take a look using weighted average, and let's get our units. First, we're going to get our units, and then we're going to have to, I'm going to close this, but can they give me a smaller minus sign there? Okay, so I just wanted to close that tracking of the audio there. Okay, and so we're going to first figure out the units, and then we'll figure out the cost. Okay, all right, so let's just go ahead and look at the units. Okay, and we sit here, and we've got this example in which they tell us that they had 300 units work in progress, and problems will often give you the percentage that they were done at the end of the year in these weighted average work in process, weighted average process costing questions. You are to ignore that. For weighted average, it does not matter how much work was done in the previous year. That is not relevant. We'll give ourselves credit for all the work being done this period on those beginning inventory items. Okay. Now, they tell us that 5,400 units were completed and transferred out. Okay, so we're going to give ourselves credit for completing all of that work, those 5,400. Now you look and you say, well, what are all these other numbers? Well, in this problem, they could potentially not give us the works completed, the units completed and transferred out, and they may make us derive it. They may make us back into it. Okay, so this was a generous problem in that it just gave us this number. If it doesn't, you may have to figure it out. Okay, so couple ways to figure it out. One is to look and say, well, I have 6,000 units in total that have been started in production. They'll give you that. 6,000 units have been started. 900 units I know are not done yet. That gives me what? 5,100 units that were started and completed this period, because sometimes the problem will tell you that. And then you would go ahead and add what? The beginning units of 300, because if you started and completed these 5,100, then you must have what? Completed the units that were already started at the beginning. And so you'll see a couple of problems that'll tell it to you like that, and you're going to have to back in to units completed and transferred out that way. Okay. More frequently, what I think you'll see are questions, and can I get rid of the star? No. Are questions in which you'll do it this way. You simply take your beginning work in progress. How many units? 300. Add the units started. And they started what? 6,000? So that gives me what? Available 6,300? Minus what? Minus the ending inventory of 900? That gives me what? 5,400 units that must have been transferred out. You could do it that way also. Okay, it just depends on how the problem is written. If they give you the beginning, they give you the unit started, that's going to give you 6,300. They'll always give you the ending. Then you can just back into, well, then we must have transferred out what? 5,400, right? Assuming they just don't explicitly call out that 5,400 that were transferred out to the next. Right? Okay. I'm just doing that because if I see someone falling asleep, I'm kind of rooting for you. I'm going, come on, keep them open. You can do it. It's kind of like, when you're watching a sporting event, you watch a boxing match, and you're sitting there going, okay, you guys don't watch boxing? Okay. All right. So you have what? You have the 5,400. They could just give it to me. You could get it this way. But some problems, one or two, they'll sit there and they'll say to you, well, they started 6,000. And there were 900 in ending inventory, and the work in process was 300. Well, that's going to get you into what? You must have transferred out 5,400. They'll always give you the ending inventory. Okay. Question? Okay, good. So let's go ahead and let's figure out the equivalent units for that fact pattern. And notice they told me for the ending inventory was what? 60 and 30. Okay. Now notice for those units that were in progress at the beginning, because I started and completed 5,400 plus there was 300 that were already in progress at the start of the period. Notice I give myself credit for all of that work, right? Even though some of it was done, we saw those percentages that I crossed out. Some of it was done last period. We give ourselves credit for the entire 5,400, and then we just have to get the equivalent units for the ending inventory. There were 900 units in ending inventory. They told us 60% complete as to materials. They told us 30% complete as to conversion costs. And this is the only reason you need to know the terms conversion versus prime costs, so that you know that conversion costs are what? Direct material and direct labor and manufacturing overhead, right? That's it. If you're waiting for a deeper meaning, stop. We take what? We take all the work that was done this period plus the work that was already in progress at the beginning, add that together. We say we completed all of that this period, and then we give ourselves what? Partial credit for anything that was in progress at the end of the year. Question? Okay, good. Now you take a look at, they say it's always equal to the units completed and transferred plus the equivalent units. And again, they'll always give you the ending inventory. You can't get to the equivalent units. So the only thing that can get a little tough is if they don't call them out as units completed and transferred, you might have to do one of those two types of calculations that I was showing you to come up with the units completed and transferred. Okay? Well, you guys giving up on being accountants? You're sitting there dreaming about, well, actually, I'm going to become a blackjack dealer in Vegas. I just decided. Nothing wrong with that. Okay? Okay, good. I don't know if I should tell this story or not. When I was in high school, I'm going to go for it. I had a friend that met this girl at a party, and I just thought it was the weirdest career objective I've ever heard, because he was talking to her, and we were all talking to her and talking about different goals and stuff, you know, high school type talk. And her objective was to become a slot machine repair person. Yeah, well, for some reason, I never forgot that. I'm like, who at 18 decides, I want to be a slot machine repair person? Okay. Maybe she figured she'd get at the money somehow. There had to be more to it than that, right? Okay, so anyway. All right, so. Okay, so you come over, and you got the equivalent units. Now, you come over, and we have to gather the cost. Again, guys, remember we're doing accounting. We're not sitting here just having fun coming up with equivalent units. So what we'll do is we will gather all of the cost. Remember, we gave ourselves credit for what? For all the units, didn't we? So we gather what? We gather all of the cost. The cost in beginning inventory and what? The cost added for the period, and we're going to use that to come up with the weighted average cost per unit for our work in process, so we can then do what? See what the cost is. And the way the book presents it, the cost of the units in ending inventory and the cost of the units transferred out. And I'm here to submit to you through the magic of journal entries. If you have the cost in beginning inventory and you figure out the cost of the units transferred out, the ending inventory comes along for the ride, doesn't it? But you can at least verify your calculations by figuring out what should be the cost of the ending inventory. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look. And notice, guys, I put a star here. Key thing that you have to know, total cost of beginning work in process. You pick up all the costs there. The cost added during the period, you divide that by the equivalent units, and you're going to have to do what? Probably two costs per unit, one for materials, one for conversion costs, because what? Because they had different equivalent units, didn't they? So you'll have to come up with two different cost per unit amounts, one for materials, one for conversion costs. Okay, so we go ahead and we gather up our materials costs, both those in the beginning, those added. We do the same thing for conversion. We have the equivalent units. We simply divide, and that gives us the cost per equivalent unit for materials, 21 here, and the cost per equivalent unit for conversion costs, our overhead and our labor, 15. You rarely would use this number. I mean, this number down here, the total, is something that is, you know, it is an exam question item. I mean, we really care about what? These two separate items, because we're going to have to track our what? Our conversion costs separately from our material cost. Okay? Okay, good. So you come over, and now we assign the cost, and we do it for what? We do it for our cost per unit for materials, our cost per unit for our conversion, for our ending inventory. Again, guys, we're picking up what? Those 540 and 270 were the equivalent unit amounts we calculated a few slides back, right? We pick up the cost per. There's the value of our ending inventory, one for materials and one for our direct labor and our manufacturing overhead. Total is 15,390. Okay. Then what? Then we go ahead and we do the same thing for the cost of the units transferred out. We've got this 5,400 times what? Times the 21 times the 15, materials conversion. That gives us the cost of the items that were transferred out for a total of this 194,400. Now we have numbers that we can actually do journal entries with. I mean, the whole point of anything you do in accounting, all these calculations and numbers, guys, don't forget, at least at this stage of this class, we're still dealing with journal entries in accounting, aren't we? Okay. So what happens? They give us this nice little presentation here as to how to account for all the costs. Okay. You had your cost that was in the beginning work in progress. You have your cost that was added. So you have total cost to account here for of 209,700. We assigned, you saw from the previous slide, 15,390 to the ending inventory and 194,400 to the costs that were transferred out. Didn't we do that? Okay. Now these are nice little check figures to make sure that your journal entries haven't gone crazy on you. They haven't made some mistake somewhere, right? Journal entries don't go crazy. You do. We do, right? We would want to do a sanity check there. Okay, so what I put up here was a ledger card for our work in progress, and here we're combining both our materials and our labor together, right? Okay, in our work in progress, we're just showing one big number for the two of them, and we have for our conversion costs and our materials. The beginning, they tell us, is this 1039, isn't it? Okay, then what? Remember, we would go ahead and debit work in progress, credit credit salaries payable for the indirect, materials for the indirect materials, salaries payable for the indirect labor. For our others, for the utility bill, we would be crediting utility, debiting the work in progress. All of our direct materials, direct labor, etc. would be going in there, and we would be putting it in here at a total of what? 199,751. When we debit that, we have what? We have the total costs that are in there. And then by our calculation here, we've determined that the cost of the items transferred out is this 194,400. Can we just calculate that? Previous slide. Right? Previous slide, we did it by taking the 21 and the 15 times the number of units. What was it? 51 or 5,400? 51 units, 5,100 units. 5,400 that were completed and transferred out, right? So we go ahead and we credit the work in progress because those are done. That credit to work in progress, that's our cost of goods manufactured, goes to finished goods, doesn't it? Right? And now we are left with what? 15,390 in our ending inventory. We almost did it right on time. 15,390 is what's left, isn't it? Okay? And so all this did was really just give us a check figure. The journal entry would have produced it for us as well, right? Question? Okay, let's go ahead and mess with some questions then. From some multiple choice questions, unless there's a question about that example. Sorry guys, I'm a little thirsty today. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look. Fabian Corporation is using weighted average method, and the assembly department started the month with 9,000 units in beginning work in process inventory that were 70% complete with respect to conversion costs. An additional 90,000 units were transferred from the prior department during the month to begin processing in the assembly department. During the month, 87 units were completed in the assembly and transferred to the next processing department. Thank you, God. Thank you. When you get a question like that, you are to say, thank you, God. Okay, because what? They've given you this, what? Amount that's going to be transferred out, right? And this question's a piece of cake then? Okay. Then they say what? Then they say that there were 12,000 units in any work in process. There were 20% complete with respect to conversion costs. What are the equivalent units? Piece of cake. Take the 12,000, multiply it by what? 20%. That's 2,400. We have equivalent units of 89,400, right? What if they didn't tell you the units are transferred out? Can you figure it out? Say they don't give me that 87,000. The way I would do it, beginning is what? 9,000, they told us. They added what? An additional 90,000 units. Now, apparently in this problem, there's at least 3 departments. What? The one before the assembly and apparently at least the one after. There's at least 3, right? Okay, you don't have to have 2, but we've got 90,000 that were transferred in. I'll put TI there. That gives me what? 99,000? 99,000 units available. Whatever. 99,000 units. And then there were how many units still left? 12,000. That's the ending inventory. If you subtract off 12,000, then they must have transferred out what? 87,000? Okay, so the kind version of the problem just gives you the number transferred out. If they don't give it to you, you can still calculate it out, can't you? Doing this? Okay. Now somebody asked me the other day, for chapter 4, for our quiz, for our midterm, what chapters do students usually have trouble with? I was asked. Somebody came up and thoughtfully asked me, what chapters do students usually have trouble with? And my answer was, probably chapter 3, probably a little bit of chapter 4, probably the equivalent units are going to give you a hard time, particularly Fifo. What I didn't say to that student is, now you're going to really have trouble if you sleep through that presentation. I didn't say that to that student because I didn't expect that that student would sleep through that presentation. But I didn't say that. Did I say that to that student? I did not. Is that the truth? Will you have trouble if you sleep through it? Probably. Maybe you're just, good at this stuff. But you shouldn't sleep during the managerial accounting class because it doesn't pay proper respect to the managerial accounting material. And it doesn't pay proper respect to your sleep and your dreams. Because what's happening? It's Valentine's Day, isn't it? So you're sitting there and you're having a dream that there's hearts flying in the air and you're rowing off to some beautiful location with a beautiful person on the other end of the boat. Meanwhile, there's somebody on the shore going, now you have equivalent units. And you keep going, where's that voice coming from? Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, any question on this one? Okay, good. That's an easy one, right? Okay, let's look at this one. This one tells us that there were what? There were weighted average method, process costing system, operating data for the lubricating department for the month of October appear below. Notice, guys, they give me these what? Percentages for the beginning work in process. Do I care? I do not care. I'm not going to use that number. Transferred in from the prior department, 40,100. Completed and transferred to the next department. Thank you, God. Thank you. If they give me that number, this question becomes a piece of cake, doesn't it? So I pick that number up. I then just have to add the equivalent units for the ending inventory, 80% of 9,600. I'm done. Okay? Now this one that I wrote over here, I left it because I guess I don't know, having a rough morning when I must have done this or something, because, and it's still valid, but I did it in a weird way. I sat there and I said, okay, 40,100 units were transferred in from the prior department. We're not done with 9,600, and then we had the 6,600, and I came up with this 37,100 that way. I don't like that because that's correct, and I must have been in a hurry when I did that, but it's not systematic. You should be consistent and start with what? Start with the beginning, which was what? 6, and then do what? Then get the units transferred in, which was what? 40,100. That gives us a total available of what? 46,700. Right? And then subtract off the 9,600. You get the same number? I think that's a little better than the way I was kind of showing you there. Okay? I wouldn't do it that way. Okay, good. Both are legit, but that one's easier. Same problem? Okay. Okay, good. Now this one is, remember I said sometimes they'll say it to you differently, and you're going to have to kind of add up what the beginning was and what they say that they have started and completed to get to the units transferred out. Okay, and so that's what they did here, where they, oh no, yeah, they told us what? 7,000 units were, no, they gave me the 4,000. Never mind, it's not this one, it's the next one. Sorry, guys. So we have what? We have units completed and transferred out. Is that a thank you, God question? So I bring that 4,000 down, and then they told me ending work in process was 3,000 times 80%, that's 2,400. We got the 6,400 here, right? Right? Okay. Okay, good. Let's look at another one. Let's look at this one and kind of suspend your eyes for a second to not look at all this writing all over it, and I'll explain it as we go along. So right now, just look at the printed information, not the scribbling. Okay. Beginning work in progress is what? 24,000. Starting production is 86,000. Ending work in progress is 19,000. Do they tell me the units that were transferred out? They do not. Okay, now, again, I must have had a weird way of doing this at one point in time. I would take the units that were started, I'd subtract out the units that were done, that weren't done, the 19,000, and then I'd add the beginning inventory to get it. That's a little backwards, isn't it? Okay, and so, I mean, you still get the right answer, but just to see how we would do it the way I'm saying to do it now, we would go ahead, let's see, let's do, maybe purple's good. Yeah, okay. Let's do purple over here. So we would start out with what, 24,000? We would add the unit started, which is what? 86,000. What's that, a total of 100,000? Huh? 110,000? 110,000? Okay. 110,000. And then I would subtract out what? The ending, which is the 19,000. And I still come to this 91,000. Okay. But that was not a thank you God question, was it? Okay. Okay. Questioning back there? Okay, so I've got this 91,000, and so I know that that's my equivalent units, but now I have to sit here and do what? I have to figure out the cost. They want the cost, equivalent cost per unit for my conversion costs, okay? And so I have to, I've got my 91,000 units, and then I look and they tell me that there were 19,000 units in progress that were 20% complete as to conversion cost. I take that 19,000 times the 20%, that equals 3,800. I add that to the 91,000, the units that have been transferred out. My equivalent units are now what? 94.8, right? Then I go ahead and I pick up the cost both in what? Cost in the beginning and the costs that were what? Added during the month. I add those together. That's the total cost here that I need to come up with a per unit cost. You take both the cost in the beginning and the cost added for the period, right? Under weighted average, right? We came up with the weighted average, just to review. When we come up with the weighted average, we took both the costs that were in the beginning and the costs that were added for the period, didn't we? For materials and conversion. And we're just doing conversion in this problem, right? Okay, so we pick up both of those numbers. Any of you have a dog? Raise your hand if you have a dog. Do you ever have to wonder if when your dog is happy? You have to sit there and go, gee, I wonder if Fido's happy today. Fido lets you know, right? If Fido's not happy, Fido goes, you know. Okay? I need you to be like Fido in this class, okay? I can't have you, kind of. That doesn't work in communication like this. We're not playing poker. Okay? So if you got it, you need to be going. You need to be, wagging your tail and stuff. If you don't have it, then you need to be going. And you could do that. You could go if you want to, or you could raise your hand or whatever, okay? But I need to know where you're at. Otherwise, this doesn't work. Okay? So don't poker face me. Save that for your parents when they're asking you what you did with all your money. Okay? All right. So we sit here and we have what? We have this beginning and the what? Cost added for the period gives me what? 653,388 is the total. Okay? You take that 653,388 and you divide it by our equivalent units. And when you do, you get this 6.89722784, which is rounding out to A. Is that my equivalent cost per unit? Do you understand how we got the equivalent units? You understand how we got the equivalent units, right? Okay. Do you understand that we gathered the cost from the beginning inventory and the ending inventory? We picked up both the beginning, cost in the beginning, and not ending, but the cost added for the period. Right? Okay, so we picked both those costs up, and then that went ahead and became our total cost. Then on an equivalent unit basis, you divide that by the equivalent units of production. That gives you the equivalent unit cost per unit for our conversion, right? Okay. I got the 94,800. Look, guys, there's two things that's going on here. I'm calculating the equivalent units, and then I'm going to gather the cost that I'm going to use to compute my equivalent cost per unit, right? Right? Okay, I got the equivalent units by doing what? By getting the numbers of units transferred. Some of the problems gave them to me, some didn't. If they're transferred, that means they're done. Right? They're transferred to the next department. They didn't give it to me in this problem, so I had to, and I had done it kind of backwards before, but I take what? The beginning plus the units that were added for the period. That gives me 110 available, minus the ending units. If they're still in progress, they're not done yet, right? And so that means that I have transferred out to the next department 91,000, right? Okay, so that's where I got the 91,000 right here. This big red circle around 91,000. And then, because I'm going to give myself credit for work that has been done up until this time, I take the units that are in ending inventory and I multiply that by, and they told me it was what? 20% done with respect to my conversion cost, right? So I take that 19,000 times 20% is 3,800. 91,000 plus 3,800 gives me 94,800. Now, are you guys talking to each other because you have something else to talk about, or you're talking about the next thing because you already understand this? Okay. The 40, so you understand this then, because there's a phenomenon that's known that while you're listening to one person, you can't hear the other. So while I'm explaining this, while she's explaining that, I'm explaining this. And then when I'm explaining the next thing, she's explaining this to you. And so you start to run into that situation on the airlines where they say, help yourself with your own mask before you help the other person next to you. Okay, so while you're putting on her mask, you're going, but how did we get the 94,800? And then you got to ask the person next to you, and all of a sudden what I have is a crashing airliner, and I don't want that, which no one's going to survive. Okay, so stay with me on what I'm talking about, and if you have a question about something else, ask me that so I can deal with that. So I deal with one patient at a time. Okay? Okay, so we've got this what? 94,800. We're good with that, right? Okay? Okay, then we take the cost from the beginning inventory and the cost that were added for the period. That's our total cost that we are going to allocate now to our amounts transferred out and to our ending inventory, right? Okay, we took all the units, so we're going to take all the costs from the beginning inventory, right? Otherwise, this isn't a true weighted average. Okay, so we go ahead and we gather up all those costs. That's 653,388. We divide it by 94,800, and that gives me an equivalent cost per unit of 6.89222784. Right? Okay, so I've got that number, don't I? And that was the answer to this question? And you're like, well, what's all that other nonsense that's written on the screen here? Okay, well, let's take a look. I'm saying, okay, that number's beautiful, but that number does me no good if I can't make a journal entry out of it, right? Okay, so I went ahead and I just kept going, and I said, okay, look, I had, the problem told me, 68,064 work in progress for my conversion cost, didn't I? Beginning. The conversion cost beginning work in process was 68,064, so I put that in the balance here. That's the beginning balance? Okay, and then I calculated on a per unit basis, my cost is 6.897222784. So I took that number, 6.8922784, and I multiplied it by 91,000, which was the units that I know have been transferred out, haven't they? Because I had to calculate that 91,000. So since those units got transferred out, that comes to a total of 627,197.33. Okay? Now, I jumped the gun a little bit. The costs that were added for the period were 585,324, weren't they? Added to work in progress for the period? Those are the costs added for the period for my conversion costs anyway. So I get this total of 653,388. I take that number, 627,197.33, the number that I just calculated by taking 91,000 times the 6.8922784. And when I credit it for that cost, since those are transferred out and they're going to what? They're going to finished goods, aren't they? See the arrow down here? The ones transferred out, you credit work in progress. They were transferred out. I'm assuming finished goods or maybe the next processing department. I think maybe there was another processing. So it would be work in process, department 3, whatever. But they're being transferred out. And so when you credit that, you get what? 26,190.67, which is the what? Value of the ending inventory, isn't it? It's still sitting in there? And just to check that number, I go ahead and I take that 6.8922784 times what? Times the equivalent units of 3,800, 3,800 equivalent units, and I get 26,190.657. Close enough? 26,000.198. 67, I'll take it. I'm 2 cents off, whatever. There's probably some rounding somewhere in there. Beginning inventory. Add the cost for the period. They told me it wasn't beginning inventory, work in progress. They told me the costs that were added for the period, didn't they? Debit work in progress. For those, credit what? Credit salaries payable, credit raw materials, credit manufacturing overhead applied, right? Debit here to work in progress. There's the debit. Those all get added. 653,388 is what's there. I take the number of units transferred out, 91,000, times 6.89222784, which is my equivalent cost per unit. I transferred out 91,000 units, so I'm transferring out costs of $627,197.33. I credit work in progress. I either debit work in progress for the next department, or if that's the last department, I debit finished goods, don't I? Because I've transferred them out. And now I'm left with what's left in work in progress, which is the ending balance, 26,190.67. And just to check that number, I just took my equivalent cost per unit, multiplied it by my equivalent units in my ending inventory. Yep, I got the right number. So I've done my work correctly, haven't I? Question? Uh-huh.
So you said that we end with 26,190 in the balance of the work in process?
That's correct.
Okay. So what I don't get, because I keep subtracting them, and it's like 40,000. Like I'm trying to get the 26. How did you get the 26,190 from the two accounts?
We should have had beginning inventory, work in progress, beginning of 68,064. I then should have added costs for the period, which the problem told me was 585,324. Gave me, I don't know, total available, I guess, if you want to call it that. Should give me total available of 653,388. Which is how high the balance got. And then I did what? I transferred out. And I transferred out 91,000 units, didn't I? Angel? Is your name Angel? I'm sorry, what's your name? Leah. Sorry, Leah. Who's Angel? Who was Angel? Wasn't there an angel in here? Who was Angel? Other class? Angel's not here? See, that's the problem with not coming to class. I'm going to catch you one way or the other. Angels shouldn't mess with the Lord. Okay. So we have Leah, I almost called you Princess Leah. Leah, we had 91,000 units we transferred out, right? Times 6.89222784 means I transferred out cost of at $6.80 something cents per unit. I transferred out cost of what? 627,198. Right there. 33. Okay. And that means then that I should be left with an ending inventory and work in progress of roughly, I think there might be some rounding error in there somewhere, 26,190.67. Right? Okay, which I was able to verify by taking the equivalent cost per unit times what I determined were the equivalent units in ending inventory, which was these 19,000 times the 20% complete. Thank you. I'll be here all week, right? I mean, this is like my house on Mondays and Wednesdays anyway, because I got 3 classes in the same room Monday, Wednesday. I'm going to get myself a sleeping bag, and I'm going to start sleeping under here. Okay? Did they knock? Okay? Question? No, I think it's just, couldn't be that they're knocking. Can we come to your class? It sounds much better. It's got to be rattling. Yeah, it's rattling. We're being haunted. Okay? Okay? What time does this class get out? Okay, so I'll tell you what. Here's what you do. Now that we have kind of started this, do 2 things. One, finish these questions, but we'll go through them together when we come back. Finish the ones here. Just do the quiz for Chapter 4A. Quiz for 4A, because it's all these same questions, and we'll go through the quiz for 4A next time. We'll start on 4B. We'll knock that out. And then next time we got to seriously be preparing for the midterm, because I think it's coming up pretty quick, right? All right, guys? Okay. See you next time. Huh? See you next time. All right. Yeah, that's the sign. Make sure you signed in. Mhm.
When I look at this slide, I'm trying to picture to see how these numbers are from.
Mhm.
So is this like this? This is looking at the WIP account on
Work in process department.
June 1st, and the beginning, so June 1st is the first number is, if you look at direct material, is this. Is that correct? If I just wonder how you get this number if you look at the working
Well,
account or something. Is this
if
how?
you were doing it separately for materials,
But but it seems like they're looking at the working process account. Yes.
yes, it's work in process, which is direct has in it added direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead, right? Our manufacturing costs. And all they're telling us here is these costs are already in here at the beginning.
So just like this, just assume this is the beginning. This direct material is this
Hmm.
number, and this direct labor, so conversion costs, they call it these things, and all these. So this is how we get this number. If you look at here, get this number, these two,
Those two together give you this number.
right? Is
Okay.
this correct? If you
Yeah.
look at it, and then and these two number are just during this the months, and added these things.
Yes.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
So do they do this kind of sum up every day or just every month, I guess?
I would think that this would be something that would probably be done on a daily basis by department because those things could come in and come out within a day, right?
Okay.
Okay. Um, I don't know. You could do it monthly. You could do it at the end of the year because you know what's already gone through finished goods and cost of goods sold. And so all you're going to be doing is analyzing work in progress at the end of the year, right? So it's whatever was beginning work in progress, say at the beginning of the previous year. Now let's see.
It just feels like they have to separate into two different costs. It's just a little bit weird. Maybe it's if it's okay to understand this way, then it's fine.
This is fine to do this. I'm just trying to answer your question though. It seems like the beginning balance could be 1-1, right? And then you could have, could you do the beginning balance 1-1? Add the costs Just trying to think the best way to do this. You have work in progress at the beginning of December, right? Everything else would have been out to finished goods. So you have whatever your cost was beginning of the period.
So that's the total number, right? You cannot separate into like direct material or
Yeah, no,
commercial.
you can.
You
It
can?
doesn't change anything. I'm just trying to answer your question of how often would they do this. And I think you could just do this at the last month. Whatever the beginning balance was of December, cost you added for December,
Mhm.
minus the cost that you transferred out in December would give you the ending balance. And the ending balance of December 31st is also the ending balance at
January.
yeah.
Okay.
So you'd probably have to start with the beginning of whatever the period was. So you'd start with December. So you didn't have to really do all this till December to figure out what the cost is of what's transferred out, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and you would have to have your cost running through work in progress, finished goods, and cost of goods sold because you wouldn't want to wait till the end of the year to track all your costs through.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, but you can do it one at a time like that. Hi.
So for those, we have to go to Connect and do it, right?
You have to be here in class to get those points.
Oh,
Connect is optional.
oh, it's optional.
Yeah, but if you start missing class, then I'm going to make you go into Connect and do homework assignments
Okay,
to miss to make up the points that you missed by not being in class because I can't give you points
okay,
for deathing.
okay,
So if you weren't here, then you obviously couldn't have done the homework, right? With me, you couldn't have done the quiz with me like we were doing
yeah.
today. So you would need to go into Connect and make that up.
And for the quizzes, is it just on Canvas? Because I
We're
saw you
doing it.
posted.
This was example of
Okay,
quizzes, and then there's also a bigger file, a Word file that has more questions,
yeah,
which we'll do next time for this chapter. And if you're not here when we do it, then I can't give you a point for the quiz, right?
yeah.
If you're here when we do it together, I can give you the point for the quiz.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
yeah. And if you have to miss and you want those points, you got to buy Connect. You got to go into Connect. You got to do the homework in there.
Okay, okay. I
Okay?
thought it was not optional. That's why.
Yeah, no, it's optional.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
okay.
you.
Sure. Hi. Um, what you can do is um, work the questions in the back of the book, in the back of the chapter, and then I think I already put the solutions up. No, I didn't yet. I'll put the solutions up for all the questions, huh? On Canvas. Yeah, I'll put the solutions up there, and so you can look up the solutions, and you can just select certain ones you want to work through. Okay. Okay. Well, it's just I mean, there's just really three things going on there. Calculate the equivalent units, gather the cost, beginning and ending inventory, divide it by the equivalent units. That gives you cost per equivalent unit. If you want to know the cost of the units transferred out, multiply that cost per equivalent unit by the units transferred out. Some questions give it to you, some don't. If they give it to you, fine. Thank you, God. If they don't give it to you, it's not that hard. You just sit there and you have to take the beginning units in work in progress plus the units added for the period minus the ending is the units transferred out. Once you get the units transferred out, you then take that plus the equivalent units, which is the ending inventory times the percent done they were at the end of the year. That gives you the equivalent unit for the ending inventory. Add that to the units transferred out. That gives you equivalent units of production. You take your cost in the beginning, the ending, put that in the numerator. Denominator is the equivalent units we just calculated. That gives you the cost per equivalent unit. And then if you want to know the cost of the units that were transferred out, you take the number of units transferred out times that cost per equivalent unit. If you want to know the value of the cost of your ending inventory, you take the number of units in ending inventory times that cost per equivalent unit. Okay? And the ending inventory calculation to me is more just a check figure because if you get the amounts to transfer out, you would just go ahead and take the beginning balance work in progress plus the units that were added, gives you the total available, minus the units transferred out, ending inventory comes for free. And then you could just do that in multiplication of the equivalent units in ending inventory times the cost per equivalent unit just to check that ending inventory figure. That's it. That's everything we said. Took us an hour and a half to say what I just said in 5 minutes. Or less than 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, see you later.